So a quick word about HeadsUp. So we are a national network of head teachers. We've been running for just shy of 2 years now. And predominantly, we sort of set ourselves up to support head teachers, recognizing the challenges that come with the job, the pressures, the stresses, the strains pre-COVID, but obviously a lot of those have been exaggerated during COVID. And we are a supportive network, and we create spaces for head teachers to talk to each other, to be their authentic selves, to offload the pressures and stresses that they may be feeling as a result of the job that they've got, but also to celebrate the role of headship and school leadership, and to really focus in on those things that we are positively doing and the impact that we are having. And that's partly a recognition that we don't always get the chance to do that in our education system, to really celebrate the fantastic work that goes on in education right across this country every single day. And we like to shout out about that, and we like to support those people who are leading schools. So that's probably what HeadsUp's all about. If you are connected into networks of head teachers, you know of a head teacher who you think would benefit from joining the network and the support that the network brings, then please do put them in touch with us. The website is, as it is on the screen behind me, it's HeadsUp4HTs. We also offer one-to-one support for head teachers who are really struggling. And really struggling to manage the stress of whatever their working life is bringing them. So we offer one-to-one support. We have a buddy system for head teachers to connect with each other and support each other. And increasingly, we also are working through local authorities to do bespoke projects supporting head teachers in different local authority areas. Everything we do at HeadsUp, we do, it's basically provided by the network. So some of the people in this room this evening facilitate HeadsUp sessions during the week, either through local authorities or on our normal Wednesday and Saturday morning sessions. Everybody gives us their time for free. We don't charge anything to head teachers. Everything that we do for head teachers, we do, as I suppose, everybody giving back into the system and supporting people. So that's a little bit about HeadsUp. Every other Wednesday, and this is one of those other Wednesdays, we open the platform up. Because one of the things that we feel really passionately about as a connected network of head teachers within the education system is there are some big things that we would like to see change over. And we're really pleased that we are supported by Big Change, who offer us some support for the work that we do in the education system. And Big Change 12 months ago, published a manifesto for change in the education system that they called their Hopes for Education. And this is Hopes for Education number 5 that you can see behind me. So we've already had Wednesday evening sessions where we've looked at 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this one is all about the trusted relationships that we would want all of our young people to have, so that every young person in our school system can really thrive and be supported in their learning. And I'm really pleased this evening we've got a fantastic sort of series of inputs. But I'm really pleased this evening that we are joined by Pupil Power. So I'm going to get the Pupil Power team to give us a wave, if you could, please, and your introductions will happen in a bit. And we've got a number of people from Pupil Power in the room, and they're going to talk, hopefully really honestly and authentically about what trusted relationships mean for them. We've also got some inputs lined up from the wonderful Zena is going to have an input into the conversation. And Adrian is going to have an input into the conversation, and Ben is going to give us an input into the conversation. So we've got, really sort of diverse set of voices this evening. But I would remind you that the most important voices beyond those that we've set up to talk are yours. This is your forum, and we want to hear from you. And if you don't want to shout it out and get into the general melee of a Wednesday evening in a HeadsUp event, then please do pop it into the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat for any really good points. Please be, as I know you all are and you all will be, respectful of other people's voice and what people have got to say. Please be celebratory. If something really resonates with you, then, pump your fists in the air or shout about it, scream about it, or just put something nice in the chat. Entirely up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. Kate, have I missed anything? I always think I'm going to miss something. It's different every time I do this spiel. So it's lovely to see you all, and I am now going to hand over to Kate. That way.
Thank you, James.
Kate, so I'm going to hand over to you.
Oh, Thank you. No, you didn't miss anything at all. It's my pleasure then this evening to introduce Ava, Aya, Simi, Lottie and Lashini from the Pupil Power. The girls and I have met up a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. We've been discussing all sorts of ways that we feel we can nurture relationships between young people and school leaders. We've had a bit of a giggle. They've told me some really very interesting, quite harrowing stories about the school leaders in their school. I'm hoping they're going to be really candid this evening and share some of those. I've explained to them, you know, this is a really safe space for us. It's a safe space for them to be. We are really here to learn, ladies, from you about your experiences of schools and what your point of view is on how we can nurture more effective relationships between young people and those that lead the education system. So we've got an umbrella question this evening, which is how can we nurture effective relationships between pupils and school leaders? And we've been breaking them down into questions that we're going to discuss. Please use the chat if you've got any kind of challenges for us, any questions, any comments around it, and we'll try and dip in and out of those. But once we've had our discussion, then we'll open the room up and you can let us know what you think and pose any questions to our Pupil Power team this evening. So, ladies, would you like to unmute yourselves? And would I'm going to pass over to Lashini, who's going to just introduce a little bit about Pupil Power and what they do. And then, ladies, if you want to introduce yourselves, that'd be fabulous. And then we'll get going with our discussion. Lashini, how are you doing?
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's really great to be here. I'm 18, so I'm actually kind of I'm in uni, so I'm kind of out of the secondary education, and it feels weird because I almost feel like I don't know if anyone can relate to this, especially the students walking past the staff room and kind of like wondering what's inside, feeling like it's like a TARDIS and like you really want to go inside. Now being in this room, it feels like I'm there, like I made it, and which is quite fun. But I just wanted to introduce what Pupil Power is. So I think I would describe ourselves as a youth-led movement, and we work to rethink education for the better. And what I mean by rethinking is I think there's often this huge misconception that it's like teacher versus student, and there isn't that kind of collaboration. But we want to rethink that relationship and make sure it's kind of, we want to show everyone that we're almost on the same side, and the system doesn't work without both students and teachers and head teachers and staff. And so it's really important that we work to bridge the gap between students and teachers. And I guess that's why we're here today. And we believe that in order to create the change has to be driven from both the students and the teachers. So a lot of the work that we do revolves around talking to teachers, as we are doing today, working with students, kind of gauging how students feel. We have a huge community and a network of students all across the country. And I guess we work together to work on projects for the benefit of the education system.
Thank you. I'm always impressed by how confident and eloquent you are. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Let's start with our first question then, ladies. We are asking, how can we nurture mutually respectful relationships between pupils and school leaders? So, Simi, you're smiling there because I know we talked about this last night, didn't we? We had a bit of a giggle. Some of the stories the girls have shared with me are incredible. So, do you want to kickstart us off on your ideas around that?
I think number one, it's just opening up the conversation and being honest with that conversation and kind of creating that sort of mutual understanding and respect between both students and head teachers, where like you can both appreciate that you're both human, that we're working towards the common goal of getting an education and being successful and things like that, but doing it in a way that like you can work together and you can learn from each other, that it's a two-way street, and kind of working and developing and growing together, not that it's like coming from like a top-down approach or the bottom attacking the head teachers and things like that. So I think it's really a collaborative effort.
Simi, have you got any ideas on how we can collaborate with the young people in our schools?
Just talk to them, I think, and approach them in a way that is free of judgment, and kind of, because I know that a lot of head teachers, they do try to sort of bridge that gap between students. Students are a bit afraid because you're the big scary like head teacher, you're supposed to be running the school. That it can be a bit scary for students, and I'm sure it's a bit scary for teachers as well to kind of put yourself out there towards your students and kind of say, okay, what needs to change, and you're going to get a bunch of comments, to say the least. So I think it's just about putting a foot in the door and just saying, having a chat, building that relationship and that communication. And with that, you get that relationship and you get that honesty.
Thank you. One of the things that we were talking about earlier in the week is how we thought it might be easier for primary school heads to do that. And I was telling the girls that I had a small primary school myself, just 110 children and only 4 teachers in 4 classrooms. My door was always open, and I could do a lap of the school in 20 minutes. That's not possible for secondary school head teachers, and I know that you understand that. So, one of the questions we were thinking around was, how can head teachers be more visible and more approachable? And ladies, any of you can just jump in.
Is everyone all right if I go?
Yes, Lottie.
Yes.
Yes, go for it.
So one thing we were talking about, which we all found was really crucial to gaining that relationship with head teachers, is being physically there. And that is easier said than done, 1, at the moment because of COVID, but 2, because I know my head teachers have always been in meetings, have been like around the city, if not around the whole of the south, dealing with stuff. But if you can be physically there, that is the first step to opening up such a massive conversation. And with that, it just involves going to sit with a group of us at lunch. It involves going to sit in the back of a lesson. It involves, like Kate's just said, just go have a lap of the school. Again, I know it's easier said than done if you've got a massive school. But this stuff is really important, and that's how you're going to get authentic relationships with students. And we've been speaking a lot recently, kind of within the Pupil Power, about school councils and how they don't necessarily, well, we personally don't think they're fit for purpose. They don't choose a representative amount of students. The students there are great, don't get me wrong, like I'm on our school council, but it's predominantly white and it's predominantly female. You're not going to get the same authentic response from a school council as you are walking around a school. Like, you just won't. And that is how you gauge how students are, and they'll learn to trust you if you're on their level. So yeah.
That sounds great. I used to work in a school in Didcot where it was policy the teachers would sit with the students at lunchtime, and we would sit and we'd have family dining. So it was an everyday occurrence, and you just had those conversations. It's almost part of the curriculum, actually, where you have those conversations with students about the things that you wouldn't talk about in your English lesson, the things that wouldn't come up in your science lesson. Those were probably the best parts of the day for the teachers and the students, making that real human connection. Sounds
Definitely.
good.
And sorry, can I go?
Of course you can.
Sorry. And also just like you can be, like you said, be authentic with them and talk about stuff at home. Obviously you don't want to go into too much detail, but it is so much more appreciated if they see you as a real human being. And real human beings, I think a lot of you probably all had it from your students when they're really young. Oh, do you live at school? And that comes from seeing you as a separate entity, which we all do when we're really little. And as I've grown up through school and I've gone, oh, my teachers are actual human beings, that helps so much with building that trust and building that communication. So for that to happen a lot earlier on, by literally sitting with your students at lunch and talking about what you did at the weekend, it sounds so small, but it's so important.
Can I jump in really quickly, Kate? Is that all right?
Yes.
So we also touched on about how leaders, it's really important that leaders share their vulnerabilities with students, and not to see that. We talk a lot about in HeadsUp about being proud of your vulnerabilities and not seeing that as a weakness, and sharing those with students. So I see that being such a positive move to building really meaningful relationships. And actually what you mentioned, Lottie, about sharing your human side is really important. And at the end of the day, and James says this all the time, teaching and education is a human profession. So what actually prevents us from showing our human side is something we need to be considering, I guess.
Yeah, I completely agree. Go on, Ava. Tell us what your thoughts are on sharing vulnerabilities with your head teacher.
I just thought it's really important because I think often, and this is coming from a student perspective, and I think in the last Pupil Power kind of meeting I was talking about this. I think students often don't respect teachers a lot of the time. I think we could all agree with that. And I think a lot of the time in the student-led spaces, I think it's often can be a bit like teachers need to respect us more. But I think a lot of the disrespect probably often does come from students. But I think that disrespect does come from the fact that they don't see you as people. They don't see you as people that can be hurt and like have feelings, and that if someone says something to you, you will go home and you will feel that. And I think that's kind of where that kind of conflict comes from. And I think a lot of it comes from, I mean, I don't know if this is like within the right question, but I think that kind of saying that I think it's really important, kind of relating to the question that Simi answered as well. I think it's really important that students really know why you're doing things, being really, really, really transparent about this. If you can't explain why a rule is, like, and it's got a proper meaningful meaning, then maybe it shouldn't be a rule. And then it just becomes something that students just see as nitpicking. Like, we had ridiculous rules at our school, like I'm trying to think of some now. So if you can remember any of these crazy...
No hair bands on your wrist. Someone got put in internal exclusion for a week because the hair bands on her wrist were distracting to learning. So the solution was to take her out of learning for a week.
Yeah, it
really didn't make sense.
I had a friend who dyed her hair over summer and it just didn't come out. It just didn't come out. And she was withheld from having her, like, she'd earned her prefect, and because her hair had just happened to not come out, the school also forced her to basically damage her hair just so the school could uphold an image, because when she dyed her hair, they said put washing up liquid in it, bleach it again, do this, do that, and her hair is basically ruined now because of our head teacher and because she wanted this image so badly. And I almost feel like the school image and I'd rather go to a school where maybe sometimes the students are, their school uniform might not be perfect, someone may be wearing trainers, but I'd rather go to a school where the students are happy instead of feeling like they're being nitpicked at all the time for really silly little things that actually aren't affecting their learning. I do understand the whole, when they get older, they'll have to, learn how to dress accordingly and stuff like that. But that also comes through experience, and being forced to do silly, not dye your hair, bleach it, but to its normal color. I don't think that's technically an experience. And, if you need a hairband, you need a hairband. That's the kind of things that rule was ridiculous. I don't really know how they got away with that one, actually.
I think that's a bit nuts. There's something in this, isn't there, about firstly explaining the why. And we talk a lot about that as school leaders. We don't ask our staff and our communities to do anything without explaining the why, because you don't get people on board until you do that. And there's also something else in here as well, isn't there, about involving young people in the policy making in schools. Does anybody want to pick up on that point?
Yeah. Kate, could I just come in just for a second, because Ava, what you just said was so brilliant, and I think what's really interesting, you said the phrase, just want children to be happy, and I think you're absolutely right, but actually I would extend it, because I think what's interesting about Heads Up and the thing that we unpick, just want staff to be happy as well, actually the adults in the school to be happy. And I wonder how many of us leaders, and I reflect on my own sort of headship a lot in this, we end up doing these things because we think we should be doing them, even though they're not necessarily the things that we think here we should be doing. And actually they don't make us happy either. So actually you go to these schools and you have unhappy children and unhappy staff and unhappy leaders. So I think your point about happiness and joy and the enjoyment of learning is so powerful. And it's a really good test and a measure for us to reflect on and go, actually, are the staff here happy? And are the children happy? And are the leaders happy? So yeah, I'll just amplify what you said, not and extend it beyond the children, because I think it should be the whole community should be happy, I think. But yeah, great stuff. Sorry, Kate, I cut across you. Just really wanted to get that out.
Not at all. It makes a lot of sense. It's the sort of thing, ladies, that we talk about in Heads Up all the time. All the time. Okay. Does anybody else want to jump in on that point?
Yeah, please. There's a couple of things. Ava made some amazing points, as of everybody that spoke so far. But the one I really want to pick up on is the one about the hairbands and all that sort of stuff. I think as leaders, sometimes we get so caught up in the black and white of rules and policy that we forget what the big picture is. And the big picture is transforming lives. And does it matter whether that young person's hair is tied back, or does it matter whether that young person's hair is blue, or does it mean that, you know, a big bugbear of mine, for example, is hair policies, right? And if we look at it in its most basic form, we're infringing on people's human rights by telling them how they have to wear their hair. And that's not okay, because what are we teaching them? We're teaching people to comply. Comply with what? Some silly rules that people feel is going to enhance learning, because they're not. It doesn't matter whether their hair is free, whether it's braided, whether it's pulled back and tied back or not. Obviously, there are arenas whereby in the sporting world, D&T and food tech, whereby, yes, you have to abide by specific rules to protect and keep everybody safe. But you know, that's one aspect. You know, going again in a different way, there's lots of schools that I see, and I've arrived at schools whereby they said hair cannot be, you know, you can't have your hair shaved. Well, culturally, for some, that's how you wear your hair. And the difference is there that we don't pick up on, and we have this whole blanket policy on things. It's not right. And therefore, we need to engage with our communities, and we need to engage with our students on that one. You know, that's imperative. So I just wanted to pick up on that point. The other one I wanted to pick up on was about the vulnerability and showing who you are as a leader. So I remember when I was a head, I'd been there 2 months, and we got the dreaded call to say Ofsted was coming. And I didn't know every kid in the 1100 in the school, but I went in assemblies with every year group, and I stood there in front of them and I said, Ofsteds are coming tomorrow. I don't care what they've got to say, as long as we collectively do what we need to do. We show them who we are as a school. And the kids just raised their game from that, because they realized it wasn't me versus them or the staff versus them. They realized this is our school, this is our community, and this is who we are, and this is what we're about. So showing that and sharing that vulnerability is imperative, because when you do that, they see that you're human, as Ava pointed out, that sometimes they think that we're robots and that we live in the cupboard and we get charged up overnight in there. But we don't, we're all human, and sharing that vulnerability and sharing with them that you're having a bad day, and you know what, I got that wrong and I'm really sorry about it. It makes a huge difference, because they respect you, and therefore then you can start to build on that relationship, and they know and they recognize, you know what, sir's all right, because you got it wrong and you apologize for it, and they wash it off, and they come back, and they, you know, they're willing to run through brick walls for you then. And I think that's something that we need to really take on board.
You know, the idea of belonging has come up again and again and again, and I wonder whether or not our pupil power in the panel ever felt a sense of belonging or feel a sense of belonging in their school, and if they do, what does that feel like, and what does the school do or school leaders do to make that happen?
I don't know whether I can. I feel like, does anyone else want to jump in?
No, Ava, go, do it.
I feel like the school I went to, it was like, it's like been around for quite a long time. I think it was opened in like 1917, so it's been in the community for a long time. And some of my friends, one of my really close friends, her mum went there, and like my mum didn't go there because she didn't live in London. But a lot of people's generations, and you'd see people, they'd have their older sisters there, they'd have, you know, parents who went there, and that was a sense of belonging. Also, kind of the school, it sounds really strange, the school kind of went from having quite a bad reputation to having like quite a good reputation. But there was always like this part of going to Sydenham. I still go there actually. I go to sixth form there. I left and then I came back to Sydenham School, and there was something like, we went to a girls' school, and there was something I felt quite proud about that. You know, being surrounded by like, young women every day who kind of were all trying to make their way through lives and stuff like that. And I think a lot of the time it was this kind of the students that would create that kind of feeling, because the students always felt like quite far removed from the heads and the head teachers. I think Simi had said in the meeting that they had yesterday, and we kind of briefly said before everyone came, that at SLT it was all women. Quite, our head teacher was black. It was very the SLT was diverse, so that was all right. But they were still talking like draconian teachers, and they also kind of old school. So there was kind of this weird separation from this quite vibrant urban school that had a lot of students with really quite kind of progressive ideas and like who were really intelligent. And there was kind of seemed to be this barrier between them, because the head teachers were so and the SLT was so, you know, like they didn't seem to want to hear that. Whenever I remember I went there, I was in year 8 or year 7 or year 9, and there was a mess of issues with the lunch queues, and I went to the teacher and I said, why don't we stagger the lunch times? Why don't we say, I think if people remember in primary school, we all had to go in at a slightly different time. They say now year 7's, well, year 6 go get your lunch, year 3 get your lunch. And I went with that idea to my head of year, and it was completely ignored. Bear in mind, like a year or 2 later, they basically brought in that idea of doing that. So it was like, that could have been put in place like 2 years later if I'd been listened to. So I kind of feel like the school community had the potential to being this really amazing kind of like progressive landscape where students could be really working with teachers. And I think there was a lot of students that would have wanted to, and even the students that would seem like they wouldn't have wanted to, I think a lot of them deep down inside would have wanted to. But I think the power a lot of time is in the head teacher's hands, and it really depends like how the SLT decides to conduct themselves, completely change how the school runs and works and stuff like that. And I also feel that a lot of the time in private schools, they seem to have more of that, a lot of the time, more of that kind of progressive ideology quite a lot of the time. They often have students being more involved, coming from some of my friends who've gone to private schools. Their performing arts departments, obviously because they have more funding, seem to be more kind of more liberal in that way, which is always quite strange to me. And I wonder if we could kind of, sometimes that it's the students who are going to schools where then, like to me, it's the government, they're not funding schools properly, who are missing out, and that's me isn't right. So yeah, I think that was really weirdly put, but yeah.
Thank you. No, we hear you. Thank you. I know we joked yesterday that I had to rewrite my own dress code in my own school to ensure that I fit in. Yeah, which made you laugh, I think. There you go. And you'll have seen Carrie's hairstyle tonight. She's got it going on. Yeah, Carrie, I know you've got your hand up. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so it was obviously I got my camera off before, and I know we've moved on to belonging now, but you know, it's for us today at school, it's Children's Mental Health Week, and it's Dress to Express. So even though I'm the head, today I have worn all sorts of different things to express who I am. And I've purposefully done myself the rainbow hair, because actually I am a really colourful, vibrant individual. And that's how I can express that. Now, I don't care. I've been on God knows how many Zooms today and all sorts of meetings. But actually, the colour of my hair doesn't affect the content of the quality of the work that I can do. So I think, you know, I just wanted to support in regards to that. And for belonging, working in SEN, there are so many places that our young pupils don't belong. They're not welcome. Society isn't made for them, and that inclusive practice. So when they generally come to our type of school, that's one of the first times that they do feel like they belong. They do feel like their identity is valued and is of worth. So when we go back to the panel, it will be really interesting to hear from the young people. For those in your school that have additional needs, how are they made to feel that they belong? Or are they segregated, and are they, you know, in the in the SEN unit, or you know, how are they made to belong?
Aya, I know you're actually in school at the moment, aren't you? You're not doing remote learning. You're in school. So how's that looking for you? Can you respond to Carrie's question about what it's like for children with additional needs in school, and how they're supported, and how their experience is?
Yeah, I mean, my experience currently is it's okay. I like having my TA around because she's a really cool person. I've actually been in an SEN school myself, but my experience of an SEN school wasn't nice at all. I went to a school that excluded pupils, didn't support the pupils that were vulnerable, that needed support, and it was absolutely horrible to be in a classroom and have like a teacher just send a student out. And I think there's this like stereotype of SEN schools being like absolutely perfect. This is like, that's not true. You know, my SEN school was absolutely horrible. They always used to say, in a mainstream school they do this, so we have to do this. It's just like you're comparing two different styles of schooling, and you're trying to get them to fit in quite aggressively in that setting, which they find difficult to be in. But that's all I have to say.
It's not what we want to hear, you know. And Carrie, do you want to step in, because I know you'll feel strongly about this?
Yeah, I've just put in the chat actually that on behalf of the education profession, I want to apologise that that's been your experience and that's been how you've made to feel, because that's the people on this call tonight, and you know, a very vast majority of education professionals would not want you or any of your peers to be feeling like that. And I think for specialist settings, you do have to have a mindset and a leadership that is aspirational and personalised and very person-centred, because the whole point of going to a specialist setting is that there is time, there are staff, and there is money to create bespoke programmes, so that you don't have to pigeonhole people into a mainstream model, and that actually the pressure to conform shouldn't be there. And I just want to say that I'm really sorry that you have had that experience, and I hope that in the future that can be rectified, and you know, some hope can be restored for you there.
Yeah, thanks. Luckily I moved to a mainstream school towards the end of year 9, and they were really lovely. So yeah.
Okay, can I just pick up on what something that Carrie said there?
Sure.
It's something that we talked about yesterday, and hearing that just is heartbreaking, and I'm finding it really tough at the minute. But here's the thing: there's many people who are sat in here who are feeling exactly what I has just said, and they're feeling that they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because the system tells them that they've got to get results, because if they don't get results, they're not going to have a job. But they also know that if they do that, then that's not the best for the young people. And that's not right. And that's why we're all here. And that's what we all desperately want to change. And we've got to get rid of that fear factor of people continuing to abide by that system, whereby they looking to see how far up the academic league table ladder that we can get, because it's destroying the generation of young people that are following, because we're not doing the things that we should be doing with them. Education is supposed to be a transformational process. And that's why we all came into education. That's why we all became teachers. That's why we all became leaders, because That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do more than just about how many 8s and 9s that someone can get. It's not about that. It's about how can we make these blank canvases when they come to us, how can we make them into wonderful masterpieces? And that is the bit that surrounds everything that we're talking around here. So I just thought I needed to say that because I've got to get it off my chest.
And Adrian, if I could can I just come in on that, because I'm really struck. This is such a powerful conversation, and I'm really struck. I think hearing your experience, but I think you used the word conforming, and what I'm struck by is if you look at it, if I look at this through the lens of Heads Up for Head Teachers, what we've just heard described happening for children in our schools is happening at a system level across schools. This absolute pressure to conform with a set of rules that as adults and as head teachers and as school leaders, in our hearts, we don't agree with, and we don't feel comfortable about. And yet the pressure, Adrian, in the way that you're describing is so great. The high stakes accountability is so high that, you get blown off that cliff at any one moment. So Adrian, round of applause for that. And I think, that's really what Heads Up is all about, we've got to challenge that, and we've got to free our head teachers up to be the leaders that they set out to be, rather than the leaders that the system forces them to be. So what we see modelled across the education system is exactly what we've just had described to us by the brilliant young people in this room. And actually, in many respects, as head teachers, we're often treated like children in that regard. We're spoken to in that way, and we've got to break the whole chain of that. I think it really needs to be addressed.
Can I just? Oh, sorry, go on, Alison.
Yeah, Alison, do, yeah.
To what James? Well, first of all, the panel, you've actually made me feel so hot, so it's unbelievable. But what I need to say is that I don't accept that. I don't accept that results and appearances and petty rules go side by side. If you look at countries which are getting the highest academic results, they are not policing hair. They are not policing the colour of socks you've got to wear. They are not policing identity. They are giving their young people the opportunity to rock up as they are, to be themselves. They're not getting into, if you're standing at the school gates to make sure that girls haven't had to make their hair look neat and tidy by the standards according to the head teacher 6 years ago or whatever, they're not going to have an argument because someone's wearing the wrong colour socks. And instead they're standing at the gate saying, welcome. It's really nice to see you today. I'm really looking forward to teaching you today. I don't care if your hair is in, it's out, it's purple, it's blue, it's long, it's short. You've come as you, and you've come here to be successful today. When you work on the self-esteem of young people, when you work on making sure that everybody feels belong, where they feel like they heard, they listened to, they have a voice, then you don't end up with situations where self-esteem is so low that you end up in conflict with the young people. So I think by working on self-esteem, and the best way to work on self-esteem is about working on belonging and giving everyone the right to be who they are, the results go up automatically. And that's just, and look at the countries which are academically successful. They're not fighting with kids. They're not fighting with kids about the color of socks and pettiness and this kind of dehumanizing behavior. And I know this firsthand. For me, belonging was much more important than what people's hair looked like. And of course, for me, I've had to have the hair battle all of my life. And I know that for me as a leader, I became a better leader when I decided to show up as me rather than fit in to someone else's idea of what a leader looks like. So yes, league tables are a pain and all of those sorts of things, but I don't believe that you will lose your place in the league table state wherever you are. I don't think you're going to drop a few points down because children haven't come dressed according to a dress code that's been designed by people who've forgotten what it's like to be a child. And I'm sorry, I just feel really terribly upset, but thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I said to the girls yesterday, I said, you are actually preaching to the converted here. I said, everybody that comes to this community want what you want. We are values-based leaders who will listen and try and promote and try and implement what we're hearing. I know you wanted to jump in and to respond, and also I would love for you to share a bit of the story we talked about yesterday around censorship in your politics class, because we were talking about how school leaders can authentically listen and actively promote students' interests. So Aya, do you want to jump back in, my darling?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's a democratic school in London, and they're the first non-fee paying school, which is quite cool. They're called the New School, and it's a really cool school. I think I'm their biggest fan, but I haven't been around to visit, but they're absolutely amazing. If you look at the behaviour policy, it's very relaxed. They have no exclusions. They have a well-supported environment for the children to be in, and they're just there for the students, and they kind of let them explore, and it's a really cool school. So I recommend you Googling that when you have time.
Thank you. We will. Go on, tell us your story.
So I take politics A-level, and I feel like there's there is a lot of censorship when writing essays and doing other things. I think that people always feel that politics lessons are not censoring students because they allow lively debate and etc. etc. This is false because I know from personal experience. I wrote in an essay. Some people could argue that Parliament is a democratic illusion, which is what I believe personally. And I was told, you can't say that. And I was like, okay. So I tried again with my other politics teacher, and I was talking about the electoral system, and I was saying how some people would argue that the bourgeoisie controlled the electoral system, so some might say it's rigged. Again, I believe that. And I was told you can't say that. And I was like, but this is politics, what can I say? And it's really disheartening as well, because I remember the first time I walked into my politics class, I was like, this is going to be amazing. By the end of the lesson, I was literally heartbroken. But yeah, censorship can happen through content or just like behavior policies and stuff like that. Normally, censorship is very subtle, so it takes you a while to figure out what's going on. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
No, thank you for sharing that. We've got any politics teachers in the room? Chris, join us. What do you make of that, Chris?
Yeah, it's really sad when kids are so enthusiastic about learning, and then they have that sort of pulled out of them by petty rules and the need to follow the considered pathways that people think are right. And so what is quite joyful though is to see Aya's passion about that, and that will take you a long way, I tell you, because all you got to do is follow that and follow your passions. And I just from what's been said so far, I was really taken with what Alison was saying there, and I know there's somebody who's got some passion about it. You know, we've learned from Alison in recent times, particularly when we looked at the work she did on her curriculum a few weeks ago, and this is linked. You know, all these things of this hopes for Ed are clever, aren't they? It's all linked together, and it's about having that confidence to form that other way, that better way that Adrian spoke about, that James spoke about. But without getting, you know, too much of a fanboy on Alison tonight, when you spoke about your curriculum a couple of weeks ago, it answered a lot of questions that resonate with tonight about that belief that if you do things properly and correctly, they will still get the results that the government crave anyway. And it is about cutting away the crap. And I had some horrific battles on that in my school about behaviour, what teachers wanted to see, and it's part of the reason I packed it in the end, because I couldn't, maybe my failure, I couldn't get them to see the way that it should be, which is exactly what you guys here have described tonight, you know. And it is about having the confidence to recognise people for what they are, to value that and build on that so that they can then be successful, instead of beating it out of them so that they're not successful because they resent what's going on around them.
Certainly, I think around bravery and taking that real big step is huge for a head teacher who's under a lot of pressure, either by governing bodies or parents or communities, or getting the results if they're in special measures, or, you know, requires improvement. There are so many different things to consider, but certainly when you hear a panel like this who is so eloquent in telling you, we want to work with you, this is not about a them and us. And if you take the idea, if we build everything from those positive, meaningful relationships, wanting our children to be happy, wanting our staff to be happy. If you think how many behaviour policies require staff to look at so many different things. Please check that children are wearing white socks or black socks. Please check that they haven't got a hairband around their wrist. Please check that children are standing up in a classroom when a member of SLT walks in. Please check that a child is not, you know, if you've got all of these different things happening, actually it takes it away from the idea that you need to build these relationships with people and with your students. And it's equally about how young people see how we do this together as staff with their parents. Someone mentioned something about the idea that students and families that are hard to reach. This idea of hard to reach, what does that mean? That just means that you haven't put the effort that needs to be given to building those relationships, because for one person saying it's hard to reach, for another person it's a simple asking different questions or looking at it in a different angle, or trying to approach a situation differently. So but yeah, Lashina, you wanted to say something because you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry, love.
Yeah, no, I've just been listening to all the great stuff everyone's been saying, but I wanted to kind of go back to what Alison was saying, because I remember when I was in year 11, it was kind of my, I guess, when I really found myself. And I remember I bought an amazing yellow coat on the weekend. I fell in love with it when I saw it in the store, and I was so excited. I was so excited to show my friends in school. I was so happy walking through the school gate. I get into school and my friend's like, wow, like that's such an amazing yellow jacket. And a teacher comes up to me, she says, Lashina, I don't think that's in line with our school uniform. That's too bright. I think you should remove the coat, and you won't be, I don't think you should be wearing it in future. I remember I was so distraught that weekend, because I felt I was so happy coming into school that week with that new coat, and it meant so much to me. And I think it's small things like that. And I feel like everyone can relate to something like that. Carrie with her hair, amazing hair. It's these small things of self-expression that can make someone feel so happy. And even in that week, I felt my school marks went down. My actual like results went down on my tests and things like that. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up, because I went to 2 grammar schools, and the focus on grades was so important to them that it almost felt like we weren't people anymore. We're just another result on the table, and it takes away from who we are, and it's really upsetting. And I think that also relates to like mock grades. I remember during my GCSEs, my mock grades were so low. I was so upset, and my mum used to come, she used to think, what is going on? I remember she used to call up the teachers thinking, oh, is she not doing her homework? What is going on with her test results? And like similar to many other students across the country, we do so much better in our actual results and our mock grades. And I just think to myself, what are they based on? I didn't really understand. And then I moved to a sixth form, which didn't have a uniform. And I think that was, honestly, personally, I was allowed to wear that yellow coat again, which felt really, really great. But one of the things that was really important there for not having to wear uniform was it actually allowed teachers to pick up on when people weren't feeling their best. And I think one thing we hear about mental health advice is, you know, you can pick up the signs, I guess, if your friends aren't doing their hair like they usually would, aren't wearing the clothes they would usually wear. And I think when some people would come in, I guess, with like joggers and like a hoodie, our teacher used to come up to us and say, oh, is everything okay? Like, how was your weekend? Is everything all right? And I think that really helped. It's a signal that we're told to look out for. And if we're all wearing uniform, how can you pick up on that signal? Sorry, just two more things to pick up on here. The second thing was, so when obviously we were talking to head teachers, a lot of it happened in a head teacher's office. And I think there's something about that head teacher's office that speaks so much, because I remember comparing the different offices in my school, and like I'd say my head of economics, I loved her office. It just made me feel really comfortable. And small things around her office made me feel really comfortable. I guess like she had loads of teddies she really liked. She kept a few magazines in the room. There were always tissues in the room. And then comparing that with, I guess, my head of maths, absolutely hated the office. I felt like I had trauma in there. I hated it. And it's like, I remember, I think things like that, small things like a room, can make the world of a difference to a student, and not feeling scared to even knock on the door of a head teacher's office, or knowing the door's always open, is really important. And I think the final thing I want to say, sorry, we're going on for quite a while here, is I just want to kind of ask all of you, what makes you empowered? Because going to an all-girls school, we were always made to feel really, really empowered. You know, we're girls, we live in this a patriarchy. We should know how to speak up, how to feel brave, how not to feel fearful. So what is it that makes you feel empowered? Is it the fact that you can go to work every day, obviously not with COVID, wearing the clothes that you like, being able to express yourself, you know, feeling powerful in that sense? And if you're able to do that, why shouldn't a student be able to do that? And whatever makes you empowered, maybe that's a reflection of how you can make your own students empowered as well. Sorry, I went on for a long time.
No, you didn't at all. It's incredible, and it's a brilliant point. I think, you know, the time that you are in now, the time of your lives, is that time to find your identity. Who are we to take that away from you? And I think you're picking up from this that, you know, the education system and the accountability system that head teachers are in and school leaders are in actually really squeeze those relationships between young people and school leaders, you know, to the point where it's really hindering relationships. But you've got people around you tonight that don't behave in that way. Like I said, I knew I'd say you're preaching to the converted, but you know, this is not how we are. But it's what we need to hear so that we can spread that message amongst others. I was going to bring, I know you've got your hands up, girls. I was going to bring Lottie in on one of our questions that we wanted to talk about, which was how can school leaders be advocates for students' interests?
Yay, I'm so glad you got onto this one. I'm really looking forward to it.
I know you are. Me
too. Before getting on to what Kate said, just to touch on what kind of everything that we've been talking about, and especially what Lashini's just said, I think we've kind of been beating around the word representation without saying it. And that, again, links to everything, in the sense that if I had a head teacher with bright blue hair and a nose piercing when I was age 4, I would be so much more comfortable with myself than I am now. And that is something that I think is really important and often looked down upon, again, because it seeks to be not professional or whatever. And I'm not just talking about in parents. I know that a lot of us, that rings true for other parts of our identities. But yeah, I definitely wanted to mention that because I feel like representation is so important. And in terms of students' interests, so I went to a school which was branded as a performing arts school, and I'm putting it like this because it wasn't at all. And other departments definitely kind of got the lead in that. And I remember, as someone who still takes performing arts now, we're completely looked down upon compared to people who do sports, etc. So as a head teacher on that level where you can engage with all these different departments of subjects, that is one thing I would say would be to make sure you're giving them as much equal attention. I know you can't give everyone the exact funding at the moment, but giving them attention is so important because it makes all students feel valued on a really big structural level. When it goes down to students in particular, again, the petty rules we've been talking about often are quite interlinked with students' interests per se. If someone's come in with rainbow hair, it's because they love dyeing their hair and they think it looks cool, whatever, they like changing their appearance. That is their interest. And by batting that down, again, like Aya's mentioned earlier, you're just getting them to conform into a society that wants everyone to come out and look the same. And I think, again, the petty rules thing needs to stop for that advocation of students' interests to come through. I'm trying to think of anything else we spoke about yesterday. Is there anything else, Kate, that we mentioned yesterday that I haven't said?
No, I think you've covered it. We were talking about representation on SLT, and you touched on that, didn't you?
Yeah,
you
definitely.
wanted a head teacher. You wanted a head teacher with rainbow hair. You wanted to see a head teacher covered in tattoos. You wanted your head teacher to have a nose pierce. You know, we wanted a diverse representation, and you didn't see that. You weren't seeing that in your school. Not everybody was seeing that. Although Simi talked about an experience, you know, she'd got a black head teacher with the views of an old white man. Wasn't that right, Simi? So we still haven't nailed it there, have we? No. Thank you, girls. I'm going to bring Ben in, and I know you've got your hands up, but Ben, can you jump in from a research perspective for us?
Yes, I can.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting that. Yeah, I mean, we've done, I mean, I'll kind of come across and cut across a number of these themes, if I may, and then before launching into the kind of concept of psychological safety. But in terms of belonging and student relationships, the importance of relationships in schools, some of the work I've done at the Relationships Foundation, which is a kind of a small charity that explore the importance of closer relationships in schools. We did a very big piece of work in Australia a couple of years ago that looked at the relationships, or looked at 11,000 relationships across a large group of schools out there, and looked at the impact of relational closeness. So we were able to discriminate between relationships. This is student-to-student relationships, student-to-teacher relationships. We were able to discriminate between which of those were close and which of those were more distant by using a measure that we have. And what we were able to show across that that large sample was very clearly that relationships protect well-being against all sorts of factors that often impact well-being in a negative way. So we found that relationships, if students were reporting strong relationships with peers, then they were protected against the impact of disadvantage, against the impact of ethnicity, which would otherwise impact their well-being. They were protected against other factors that we found impacted well-being, like the time they'd been at school, for example, and the distance they had to travel to get to school. And what that work has done really is demonstrate how relationships, if you like, underpin a lot of the outcomes that we seek to achieve in schools, because of course if well-being is poor, then nothing else happens effectively. You know, of course, a lot of the factors that people have been talking about here, whether it's policies that people feel are divisive, you know, and we've been relatively polite in talking about hair policies, but at root, hair policies are often profoundly racist, actually, and 100% classist. You know, and one can look at uniform policies in similar ways. Actually, uniform, whether it's in the army or police or anywhere else, is specifically designed to not allow self-expression. And you know, if we actually think about what it means to express yourself, if we're talking express yourself, and you know, it's often easy to use those words, or express yourself, without actually really thinking about what it means and what it means if we deny people's capacity for self-expression. But what I'd like to do, if I may, and tell me if not, Kate, is launch from here into a discussion around staff relationships. Is that okay? Where's Kate gone? Yeah.
No, I'm not going anywhere. I think that'd be fabulous. I'm just aware Simi and Ava and I just want to jump in.
Yeah,
and
please.
Can we come back to that point?
Yeah, of
that's
course.
Brilliant. And I think it's fabulous because the girls are all really intrigued to know what goes on in the staff room and behind that head teacher's office. we know why those tissues are really there, but we'll come back to it. Okay. So Sima, Ava and Aya, can we jump in? Do you want to respond to Ben?
What, me first? Sorry. Oh.
Go for it, my love.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that sort of limiting that sort of expression is because it's based schools. A lot of head teachers think they have to kind of lead a school based on fear, which I don't think is necessary to create respect at all. I think you can create respectful relationships that are based. Bringing it back to what we said earlier about vulnerability and things like that. You don't have to lead with fear. And I think it's that fear that means that school students are also afraid as well to speak out or to express themselves. I mean, just looking on hair policies, I felt so scared to change my hair for like 5 years that when lockdown came, first week, I shaved half my head. Call it slightly impulsive, but I was so glad I did it. And I don't regret it like at all. But it's because of the fear that's like instilled on head teachers from league tables and the pressures from that trickled down to students that were so afraid to like put a foot wrong or to just change or do anything different, that I think we really need to dismantle, because fear is no way to lead a school, it's no way to learn. Like nothing productive is going to get done when it's in an environment of fear.
Thank you. We hear you. And, we had a story yesterday about the head teacher that enforced a policy where the children were made to stand up every time a member of SLT walked into the room. And we were talking about how archaic it is. How archaic is that? What purpose does that serve? We laughed about it, didn't we? But we shouldn't be laughing because it's bloody ridiculous. Head teachers that are here tonight are not those sort of head teachers. And you said, there is an element of control there, isn't there, that is not necessary to demand respect from students. We demand respect. So I said in the chat that you nailed it, through sharing our vulnerabilities. That's how we establish positive relationships. Thank you, Simi. Ava?
Yeah, one thing I really wanted to pick up on was something that Lottie said. I don't know, it's probably not the, I don't know, but it's just the thing about sports. It really resonated with me, actually. Sport seems to be the performing art that gets the most. I did dance and drama for GCSE, rightly or wrongly. But I loved dance. I danced since I was 6. And drama, I'd always loved doing drama. I'd loved doing the little performances in primary school. Simi might remember that was like my favorite part of the year. I'd be devastated if I didn't get a part. I would cry for 8 hours. I was that it was what I loved to do. And then going to secondary school and then just seeing how sport would be put on this massive pedestal, and it has been kind of my whole life. You watch sport on TV, you see how it's got the Olympics, it's on TV all the time. You get, my dad shouting at the TV about football and all of that, and it's always there, and it's always a massive part of everybody's lives. And I really want to know whether, because more men tend to take part in sport, is that why, maybe a reason why it's been kind of promoted in school more so? I went to a girls' school, and I felt that it was kind of always put above dance, especially. Dance seemed to be the performing art that was kicked to the side and wasn't seen as anything important. Considering that dance has been part of our history for so many years, probably longer than maybe even sport has been to a certain extent. It's a crucial part of almost every single person's culture, and it was just kicked to the side. I'd seen some of the best dancers I'd ever seen, who could do amazing things, and we'd get a dance show once every 2 years. Sorry, Sylvia, I know you're in the music department. They had a music show every term, and what's the inequality there coming from? And then my mum would always look in the newspapers, and the school newspaper, and she'd be like, oh, it's sport again, sport, the netball team's done this, the basketball, the football team's done this, but where's that love for people who are doing other performing arts? And there doesn't seem to be that kind of equality there, and I don't know where that's kind of come from. I don't know.
I don't know. That's not my experience. Something through my mind is going, sports premium, school development plan. There was some kind of action around there that you guys wouldn't have been aware of, that, you know, just really there's an inequality in what they were pushing there, and what they saw as successful and of interest. Yeah.
I just, it's something that always kind of, I just really resonated with that. And then what Alison and Adrian were saying about, I think league tables and results are probably one of the worst things ever to happen to education ever. I think one of the most, and I've said this in almost every single meeting I've been in. Anyone who's been in a meeting with me probably already knows I've said this before. I think it really stood out to me how after my GCSEs was cancelled, that it was, everybody said, what was that all for then? Nobody cared about what they'd learned. Nobody cared about the skills they may have gained. It was about the result at the end and about taking that exam. And that told me that there is something incredibly wrong with our education system, as that if our education system was educating people and it was teaching, you know, inspiring students, it wouldn't be about, oh, it may be a bit of disappointment, oh, I wanted to take my exam. But it wouldn't have been like this kind of, well, that was pointless then, because you'll be like, well, I still learn everything. Like, I felt that myself, and I love history, and I did took history, and I enjoyed the history courses, but the exam has been so drummed into us since day one, you know, that it's just like, it's like that is the be all and end all, and that's not what education is about. You learn everywhere you go. You learn from going around to your mate's house and they teach you how to do a silly dance, a makeup look, you know, a song, you know, you fall off your bike, you've learned something. Education comes from absolutely everywhere, and you don't take an exam in that. And I think that's so important to think about. And about kind of the nitpicking and the hair and the uniform, I've heard stories of girls telling me that they've been told that they can't wear this a certain way because it may distract the male teachers. What is going on there? If you're distracting a teacher as a child, that's a problem. That's not your fault. That's because that's like enabling and allowing what is paedophilia. And I just think, why are schools teaching us to accept these things as normal? Like, why is this being allowed and just being put above the education of our students? Why is what a student looks like put over what they're saying? Like, that's kind of what, like, the whole kind of civil rights movement was about. You know, it wasn't about what you looked like, it was about the content of your character. And schools are reinforcing these things, and by showing these little things, what may just seem, oh, it's just a hairband, it's a hair colour, well, those things develop. And then it starts to be, it's not a hairband or a hair colour or how you dress. It starts to become about skin colour, your gender, your sexual orientation, your whether you're considered able-bodied or not, or, you know, neurodiverse. And that just, our schools just seem so uninclusive. It feels like an institution, and it shouldn't feel like an institution at all. Exams and results are the least important part. You know, education is about learning and keeping them in your brain. You know, you shouldn't have people saying, oh, I can't remember anything from, I did GCSE French and I can't speak French, a word of that. It should be about something that, you know, you've learned how to maybe go ahead and pick up. You might not remember all of the French you've learned, but you've learned the techniques of how to communicate with people from different cultures. You've learned how to, maybe some of those skills to go ahead and pick up another language that maybe you more so wanted to learn. It's that kind of stuff that I think is just so important, that
Ava, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. Look at the heads that are nodding.
No.
Heads. Look at the people that are nodding around the room in agreement with you. And we feel this as well. We feel this as well.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about what is it we are teaching in schools? What is our curriculum delivering? What the hell is it that we are measuring? Yeah, because we don't want to teach you to pass exams. We know better than that. We want to teach you the values and we want to teach you the skills. And it's a really tough system to work in.
Yeah,
because that's what we are encouraged to do. But actually, when you're a values-based leader, like we are here, that's what we really push in our schools.
Exactly.
We alter our curriculums to make sure that we can deliver that as much as possible. It's a really difficult system when you are you are working so that your students can pass exams. We know, there's grown-up men and women that have reduced life opportunities because they didn't pass an exam when they were 16 years old. The system is a mess.
The government
is archaic and it needs to change, and we agree with what you're saying. Ava, I'm going to bring you in on my voice is shaking because I feel really strongly about this. I'm going to bring you in on the last point, and then I'm going to get back to Ben on his psychologically safe staff rooms. Yeah,
so I just wanted to touch on capitalism and the education system and how that may intertwine, because of course it does, right? So we have, when Thatcher came in, obviously we all know Margaret Thatcher, her ideal version of schools was academies, right? So this has all been mapped out, like it's all been planned out, right? And the current system, it allows two types of teachers, right? It makes space for two types of teachers. Those teachers, right, that are right wing, tick, right? Those teachers that are left wing, maybe, I don't know, maybe they resonate with the students, let them in, because it's an illusion of democracy, right? So we have to let them in. But we can restrain what they have to do, and we can restrain them resonating with the students and restrain them changing the rules completely by censoring their freedom of speech and their right, what to wear, what not to wear, anything that might show they're a little bit too radical, including tattoos, including hairstyle. That's absolutely bonkers, in my opinion. But that's how the system is, and it's very hard for left-wing teachers to change that. So I just wanted to point that out. Also, there's this book by Paulo Freire called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which I can see heads nodding. So that is a great book. Like, I love that book. As a student, I love it, and as a teacher, I would love it, 10 times more.
We have a book recommendation list, and I can see Alison's going to put in that one on there later. I think it's one that we would all like to have a look at. Thank you. Thanks for that recommendation.
For those that have read it, I would recommend read it again, because it's an amazing book and you can never get bored of it. Read it again. For those that haven't, make sure you read it, because it's absolutely essential. You can, I don't know, if I were a teacher, I would read that book again and then maybe sort of sneakily apply some principles from that book into your teaching. That's what I would do. And
I like that advice.
Yeah. Similar, I would do that with the democratic school that I just mentioned earlier. I would look at the behaviour policy and then sneakily apply some principles as well, because I know some teachers that do that.
Thank you. You've got some fans in the chat, my love. Check it out.
Actually,
check it out.
Kate, can I just say, I think all of you have. I'm literally sat here wondering why you are not running the Department for Education.
We need to set that up for these young people,
You've spoken
James.
more sense in the last hour than Gavin Williamson has in the entirety of the last 11 months. I'm completely blown away. Honestly, flipping heck. Thank you.
These young women are incredible. You're all awesome. I'm going to wrap our conversation up there because I really would love to hear also from Adrian and Zena and Ben, but please, you must know that you guys are the future. I feel like old hat. I feel like my time is done. I feel like I need to be opening the door for you guys. Okay, you are the future. You are the future change makers. Let us open a door for you. Step in, step up. You're nailing it. Age 16 and you're nailing it. Thank you. You are awesome. Before I move on, I want to say to you, I would like to offer each of you some time doing some leadership coaching with me and some of my incredible colleagues as a gift to say thank you for coming into the space with us tonight. You are incredible. I want to help you on your journeys. That's for, you know, I'm offering that to all of you, and Alaya that couldn't be here as well. Okay, Ben, where are you, my love?
I'm here. Thank you. Yeah, I'm just gonna
step up.
Thank you. I mean, incredibly powerful conversations, inputs, and I'm going to kind of go now from the sublime to the ridiculous. I'm not sure, I certainly can't beat it, but what I'm going to suggest, and if it's all right, I'm going to share my screen, which I think you should be able to see now. What I'm going to suggest is that none of this is actually possible unless the students, if I can work out how to, here we go, I'll come off that, let me try again. None of that's actually possible unless the adults change. You can't improve a system, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a system. You can't improve a system without, sorry, I'm juggling a few things here. Let me just come back to sharing my screen. Can you see that at the moment? There we go, that's better. What we're talking about here is if you want a school to be psychologically safe for students, it needs to be psychologically safe for adults as well. And I'm gonna whiz through this because as a school leader, everything you do involves relationships, and it's really important to recognise that. And relationships are critically important for the reasons we discussed earlier. If relationships aren't secure, then it's very difficult to trust. Let me just see if I can share this in a different sort of way. Are you able to see this? I'm struggling to see.
Yes, you can see your full screen.
Great. Oh, there we go. Okay. So can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, but you can't see my screen, which has next slide and everything on it. Great. Okay.
Yes, we can see that.
Can you? Okay.
Before we didn't, but we can now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll run through this anyway. So I'll end the show. Has anybody come across this chap, Martin Bromley? Because when we talk about psychological safety, the need to create a psychologically safe organisation has a lot to do with trust, as I've said. And Martin Bromley is an airline pilot whose wife was taken ill a number of years ago, and she died sadly in hospital. She was under the care of a very senior clinician, and that clinician made a number of significant mistakes in her care, and several of the other members of the clinical team were junior to Martin, to the senior clinician, and although they could see that mistakes were happening around them, they could see that the care that was being provided to Martin's wife was substandard. They didn't feel that they could say anything because the clinician who was running the surgery was more senior to them, and they didn't feel that they could raise their concerns. And one of the key aspects of Martin's role as an airline pilot was to understand the importance on a flight deck of co-pilots being able to share their concerns with the pilot, and of stewardesses and other staff being able to share their concerns with their senior colleagues. And so he established a group that deals with something called human factors design. And human factors aims to build psychological safety into systems. And his work has been profound in the health sector. He's had a significant impact there and has yet really to have, but human factors has yet to have a significant impact in the school sector. But there's some really interesting work which I'd invite to you. People have talked about fear before now. People have talked about the concept of fear and the need to overcome fear. Amy Edmondson has done some really interesting work with organizations, working with Edgar Schein, who's a very well-known Harvard academic who works on culture, school leadership and culture, or leadership and culture. And many people in the school space have looked at the implications for his work in schools. But what Amy went on to do, when she was a postgraduate student working with Schein, she went into hospitals to look at what the difference was between clinical teams, surgical teams that were successful and surgical teams that were less successful. And what she found was quite surprising, because what she found was that what she expected to find, rather, was that the teams that were successful would be those where there was the most senior academic or the most senior clinician, and that they had logged the least number of mistakes. What she didn't expect to find was actually what she found. What she found was that the teams that were the most successful, obviously the senior clinician knew what they were doing, but they weren't that senior. So they weren't as old. They tended to be the younger members of staff. But critically, she also found that the most successful teams were those that had logged the most mistakes. And that seemed quite counterintuitive to her. But on further exploration of that, she found that actually what was going on was that those were the teams where people were less wary of admitting to mistakes. They were less concerned about flagging when something had gone wrong, whether it was them that had made the mistake or somebody else that had made the mistake, because they recognized that those mistakes were actually critical to learning, and that the learning that could be had from mistakes and from errors was a really important part of their work. It was their responsibility to learn from those. And one of the kind of areas there has been some work in the school space around this, and I don't know if anybody remembers. I'm just trying to look up on my bookshelf behind me. There's some work done. A chap called Robin Skinner wrote a lot about institutes and how to survive them. He wrote Families and How to Survive Them, I think, with John Cleese, and had a program on television. He also wrote Institutes and How to Survive Them, and his early work as a child psychiatrist was done in schools, where he explored. His brief was to go into schools and work out how he could kind of stop exclusions before they happened. So he'd go into schools and find out what it was that was happening in those schools for the young people, so that the schools then didn't actually have to exclude the young people, such that they would end up in his care as a child psychiatrist. And his work in schools that began to have the greatest impact was to encourage teachers and school leaders to actually talk about their concerns, to raise the issues that were troubling them. And I wondered, I was interested in amongst the experience of the school leaders here, actually how they would conceive of psychological safety in their organization, how they feel that they could make, or how you feel that you could make your organizations, your staff rooms in particular, safer places to have conversations around anxieties. The example from Skinner's work is he had a discussion group with staff in an alternative provision school, and he was sat with a group of staff, and he was talking about inviting them to talk about their concerns, And as they were finding it very difficult to talk about the things that were troubling them. They'd said that they had this one child who they didn't really think that they could do anything with, that every time they tried to deal with him, he would just scream, and they found that very difficult. At the exact moment they were talking about this, the child was outside the door and he screamed. And Robin Skinner, instinctively, he said, "Oh, I've heard that, and that makes me really anxious. I'm on the edge of my seat. That makes me feel I want to throttle somebody, throttle the child." And of course, everybody was in significant shock. That sort of conversation can't happen in schools. That sort of thing can't be said. But then others began to admit to this as well. They began to admit to feeling violent, actually, in response to this noise, this distressing noise that happened outside. And the conversation that developed from that was significant. It was highly developmental. People began to talk about their vulnerabilities that they felt in the face of the problems that these children presented. And when he left, and there were a few weeks later, they came back and they were talking about other incidents and other children. But a few months later, he went back in and reviewed the case, and he was asking about this child. How is this child now? And what they'd said was that actually he's better. He's not a problem anymore. But they couldn't work out why, and it was because they hadn't kind of consciously made any changes to the way that they dealt with this child. The explanation being that the fact that they were able to acknowledge their feelings for that child and what he stimulated in their what he stimulated in terms of their emotions changed the way that they worked with that child, and that had a significant impact on his capacity to manage his behavior better. Now, what that suggests about psychological safety in the workplace is that the ability to air grievances and the ability to air concerns and to be, we're using the word authentic a lot, but actually to air negative feelings as well. We're often obsessed with and focus in on the idea of happy staff rooms and positive staff rooms, but actually being able to air things that aren't happy and air things that are concerning and are anxiety provoking is similarly important. And I'd planned to be able to kind of run you through a few of the slides, but I couldn't get the technology to work, I'm afraid. I'm not quite sure why, because it's always worked previously. But I was going to invite you, and still invite you actually, I was going to run a short clip, but I'm just invite you to think about the characteristics that you as a leader might have to show to your staff in order for people to feel that they were able to come forward with the things that concern them in their day jobs. And we've touched on some of those things. Vulnerability, that was the subject of the clip that I was going to show you, which I can share afterwards. Especially given the fact that schools are places of learning, and most child and educational psychologists will tell us that learning, admitting that one has to learn something is to admit that one is ignorant of something, which is often one of the most anxiety provoking things one can do in a school, because of course the whole focus is learning and knowing. But admitting that one doesn't know and opening oneself, particularly as a school leader, up to that is a vital part of the process. So apologies for the technical errors, but I'd invite you to kind of think about the characteristics that you might feel as a leader that you would need to demonstrate in order for your staff and of course your students, because you're all in the same system, to feel psychologically safe.
Thank you, Ben. I think, do you know what, that would be a fantastic activity as we draw the meeting to a close. If you could respond to that in the chat, perhaps before you leave the meeting tonight. So it's the characteristics that you feel are important. Was it Ben to share?
The characteristics of a leader.
Of a leader.
Of a leader that enables staff to feel safe enough to air concerns and grievances, a lot of which are bottled up and have a negative impact, of course, on staff well-being.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay,
so that's something that we could leave with the chat. James,
yeah,
wow.
I just wonder, Ben, yeah, wow, what a session, Ben. I just wonder, we might get you to come back and expand on some of that, I think, on another session, because I think there's definitely more to explore there, I think, around, we talked a lot about trusted relationships for every child, but actually, we've got to get the adults right first. And I think, our role as leaders in doing that, I think there's a lot more to explore there. Zena, you've got your hands on. I think you want to say something. I'll just invite you to say something really quickly, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
It is really quick. I just wanted to kind of make the point that for some young people, school has been quite a traumatic experience. And that it comes back to, why are we at school? We're trying to do things to change and transform young people's lives. And so for me, that's a really important thing to consider. And once we think about our own feelings that are aroused by pupils' behaviour, for instance, losing my train of thought there, because I've gone really, really quickly there, James. But I love what you said, Ben, about us having a space where people feel safe to be open about those vulnerabilities is really important. And actually, I'm doing some work with a woman called Christina Mitchell, who is talking about supporting and coaching traumatized adults who teach traumatized children. So once we deal with our own trauma, we're able to support young people who have that trauma. And I spoke quite openly about trauma and fight, flight and freeze with the pupil today in year 8. And I said, why did you run away today? She was like, I was scared. And I said, did you know that you were in flight mode? And she was like, does that mean I run away all the time? And I was like, yes, that's why we were running around after you for an hour today, but you were safe. We were trying to help you. She was like, oh. So it's like, there's so much to consider here. This has been amazing. And I just want to say massive thanks to Pupil Power. You rock.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zena. And just some thank yous. So huge thanks to Zena and Adrian and Ben for their inputs this evening. A huge thanks to Kate for pulling this session together. Kate has been absolutely amazing, really well curated and pulled together. It's been fantastic. But could we have a huge heads up round of applause, please, for the team from Pupil Power? The ripples that you will have caused in this room and the thinking that you will have created in this space has been absolutely amazing. And I'm just really, really blown away by some of the messages that you've given us this evening. It's been absolutely fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed that session, but as you know, we try to make sure that Heads Up isn't just a talking shop. There's been loads of really good chat. The chat has been on fire tonight, so thank you to everybody who's contributed to that. So we would ask you now to consider your pledges. So we've got a task from Ben to think about how you're creating that psychologically safe space for people in your schools, and about your own behaviours in doing that as leaders in the school setting. But we would like you, I think, this notion of empowering. So we'd like you to please, we want you to do a pledge on Twitter, on social media, on whatever platforms you use. It's Facebook, it's Twitter, or it's LinkedIn. But if you could please make a pledge on the following: how you are going to empower others, and you can articulate that pledge. So listening from tonight, how are you going to empower others? And you can do that for the reflection about how you yourself feel empowered. Which was the challenge that we were given earlier on. So you might put all of that into one post. You might need a thread if you're feeling really sort of wordy. You might need to write a couple of posts on Twitter, but really sort of answering that question: I feel empowered when, and then this is how I'm going to empower others. And I think that would be a really fantastic output from tonight. And if you can sort of reference Heads Up and put the hashtag hopes for Ed in, it'll also be picked up by Big Change. Thank you all for joining us. Apologies if you didn't get your chance to sort of speak out and have your say, but hopefully just listening in has been really, really empowering for all of you as well. And one last big round of applause, please, for everybody from Pupil Power. If you're not running the country in the next couple of years, then we need to make that happen. We really need to make that happen. So thank you ever so much, and have a wonderful rest of the evening, everybody. I really look forward. Just a reminder, I didn't say this earlier on, I did forget something, Kate. We've recorded this session, it'll appear on our YouTube channel. We will definitely be taking some inspirational clips out from some of the things that people have said in the room and putting those on social media channels. So please take a look out for those. But just a reminder, in our normal Heads Up sessions, Saturday morning, and the other Wednesday, the one that is not this Wednesday, the other Wednesday is our Heads Up support sessions for head teachers. Please do come along and join us, join that very celebratory but supportive environment. And that is a safe space which we don't record. So we only record these Hopes for Ed sessions. So just so that everybody's really clear on that. But thank you ever so much for everybody's inputs. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one, whenever that may be. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it'll be 3 weeks because it's half term in 2 weeks. So it'll be 3 weeks time. I think that's right, Kate. We'll sort it out and let you know. Don't worry about it. We'll send some communications out. Brilliant stuff. Thanks everybody and good night.